Imagine a vast and vibrant land overflowing with cotton, silk, spices, and artistry. A land that once sent its finest muslin to the royal courts of Europe and Asia. That was India before the British arrived. Now fast forward to 1947 independence. The picture has changed dramatically. The economy is underdeveloped, agriculture is stagnant, industry is shattered, and poverty is everywhere. So what happened? How did a land so rich become so broken? To truly understand modern India's economic journey, we must first look back into the shadows of history. Welcome to Chapter 1 of Indian Economic Development, Indian Economy on the Eve of Independence, where we uncover how nearly 2 centuries of colonial rule laid the groundwork for the challenges and the choices that followed. You might be wondering, why begin with the past? Here's why. To truly appreciate how far India has come, we must first understand where we began. The structure of our economy today, whether it's liberalization, globalization, or modern industries, didn't appear overnight. It's all deeply connected to the colonial foundations laid by British rule: how they governed, how they taxed, and how they traded. Chapter 1 sets the stage. It explains why, after gaining independence, India urgently needed planning, reform, and a strong, developmental state. In simple terms, this chapter answers to critical questions: what was India's economic condition in 1947? And why was a planned approach essential for national growth? Because the British didn't just rule India politically, they controlled its economy at every level. Let's take a moment and travel back in time. Long before British rule, India's economy was vibrant and independent. Our textiles, spices, and intricate metalwork weren't just traded, they were treasured across Asia, Europe, and beyond. Want proof? Take Dakai muslin, an unbelievably fine cotton textile from Bengal. So delicate, so luxurious, it was said to be fit for royalty. It wasn't just fabric, it was a symbol of India's craftsmanship. But then came the British, and their policies turned a flourishing economy into a colonial engine. India became a supplier of raw materials and a market for British manufactured goods. By the time we reached 1947, the damage was done, agriculture was stagnant, handicrafts had collapsed, industry was barely functional, and poverty? Widespread and crushing. This chapter helps us unpack that crisis piece by piece and understand why independent India had no choice but to plan, rebuild, and reform. The British didn't industrialize India, they industrialized it. Instead of building the economy, they bled it dry, using India as fuel for their own industrial revolution. Let's bring this into focus with a real-world analogy. Picture a skilled farmer. He owns fertile land and good tools. Now imagine an outsider walks in, takes the tools, uses the land, grows crops for himself, and walks away, leaving the soil exhausted. The farmer is left weaker, the land barren, and the system completely broken. That's colonialism in a nutshell. It wasn't about growth, it was about extraction. From exploitative systems like Mindari, which robbed farmers of their earnings, to trade monopolies that forced India to export raw materials and import finished goods, it was a one-way flow of wealth. Now, let's take a closer look at the hard numbers that defined India in 1947. First, aggregate real output growth. It was less than 2% per year. That's right under 2%. For a country of India's size and potential, that's barely a pulse. Next, per capita income. How much each person earned on average grew at a sluggish 0.5% annually. In real terms, that meant almost no improvement in living standards for decades. Life expectancy? Just 32 years. Yes, you heard that right, 3 decades of life was all most people could expect.
And literacy? Less than 16% overall. Even worse, for women, it was just 7%. That's 7 out of every 100 women able to read or write. But the most heart-wrenching figure? Infant mortality rate, which was 218 per 1,000 live births.
Let that sink in. For every 1,000 babies born, 218 did not survive infancy. These aren't just statistics, they tell a story. A story of neglect, poverty, and systemic inequality. And this is exactly why, after independence, India couldn't leave its economy to chance. The state had to step in, to intervene, invest, and uplift. A planned, welfare-driven economic policy wasn't just a choice, it was a necessity. So, why does this chapter matter? Because to understand economic growth, we must first understand economic damage. To value planning, we have to see what needed repair. In the upcoming videos, we'll unpack each sector: agriculture, industry, foreign trade, and infrastructure, and reveal how colonial rule reshaped them all. Think of this chapter as your base map, a starting point for India's economic journey. The road to reform began right here, in the ruins left by colonialism. So stay with us as we dive deeper into each piece of the puzzle and discover how India began to rebuild itself one step at a time.